so nervous. It's like...
You just missed the stop sign.
Oh, oops, sorry.
We just sold my car that I've had for 8 years.
Also, we were joking that Frank doesn't have a escape vehicle anymore, so if he wanted to just get up and leave, can't do that anymore.
Yeah, so we basically sold off our car to a dealership because we didn't want to deal with all the hassles of finding a buyer. We never imported the car into Canada, which is why we came to the States to sell it. And the first dealership we went to, they actually wouldn't even buy it because the title was in Massachusetts. My driver's license is now Canadian, and the plates are from Iowa. And apparently it's like more work for them to actually buy the car. So essentially they're just being lazy. And they're like, oh yeah, if you get the title in Washington, we'll buy it. But obviously we're not gonna go to the DMZ for 3 hours, and there's no way we can really get a title because we never lived in Washington. Like, we don't have an address here or anything. So we just went to a different dealership and they bought it.
We lost out on $500 though.
Yeah, it was $500 less than the other dealership, but like, it's not a big deal to us because we could have probably gotten like $3,000 to $5,000 more if we sold it to a private party. But like, we don't live in the States, and it takes us, it's gonna be like over a 3-hour round trip. And we're not even in Seattle. Like, we're in a city called Bellingham, which is another hour and a half north of Seattle.
Yeah. So we made a whole day out of this. We sold the car, and then we went to Trader Joe's. Then we just stopped at Costco. So now we're on our way back. And like, surprisingly, that took us like all day.
Well, we also went to the mall. We also ate food at this random place. And
That was really good.
Also got a new phone plan for me because if you have Google Fi or AT&T or T-Mobile or any of these phone plans, like a US phone plan, and you're in Canada for an extended period of time, they'll actually cut off your data. Because even though they allow international, they allow roaming, they allow calls between like Mexico, US, and Canada, you don't actually, like, you can't keep it for an extended period of time. So my data got cut off maybe like a half year ago or something. But
So Frank just does not have
I just don't have
data.
data. I always have to tether off of Annie's phone.
Yeah, one time I lost Frank at Costco. I just like could not find him for the life of me. I walked around for at least 40 minutes or something.
No, you didn't. That's such an exaggeration.
Anyways,
20
and
minutes
then
maybe.
I was like, I was about to give up, and then my friend calls me, and she just happened to be at Costco too, and she saw him at the door, just like wandering around outside.
No. Okay, Annie like never tells stories truthfully because she
This
tries to
is
make
my
it.
side of the
She
story.
tries to make it more entertaining, but like
Well,
whenever she
didn't
says
work.
something, you have to think about it. It's like exaggerated at least 50%. So like she was not wandering around for 40 minutes. I was not like. So like what happened was, I couldn't find Annie, so I assumed like, okay, maybe she's like at the car waiting for me. And so I went to the car, she wasn't there. Then I go back to the entrance, but I don't have a Costco card. So they don't let me in, like I can't go in. And then Annie's friend comes out and she's like, oh, like I just saw Annie, like, are you here with Annie or whatever? I'm like, oh, actually, can I use your phone to call her? And so I call Annie, and Annie's like furious, and she's like cursing, she's like, where the hell are you? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then the friend's just like, oh my God, like, because she could hear it through
yeah,
the
my
screen.
friend was the one calling me, and she was like, Frank is over here. I was like, oh my God, I'm so mad at him. At that point, I was just so pissed. Because of the phone thing, like Frank hasn't had a phone plan for a long time, which means I can never find him whenever I want. And it's something that I've like already like got so upset over multiple times. And so
listen to why she's upset though. She's upset because she had to push the cart and it's so heavy. The
Yeah.
cart that I literally push every single time without complaint. You have to push it once and you get mad.
yeah.
Think about that.
Well, I was like tired and my feet hurt and like
So-
you're nowhere to be found.
Wow.
On top of that, Frank's phone is always on silent, which means like even if he does have like Wi-Fi, or the days that he used to have like phone service, I would never be able to find him because it's just always on silent.
Yeah, and then WhatsApp made a feature that it would like override the silent feature if you made someone like a important contact, which I eventually did.
iPhone does that too, I think.
Yeah, but like at that point I didn't even have data anymore, so it's not like it mattered.
Yeah.
But on a similar subject, we can kind of talk about the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial results. Like, I've seen surprisingly a lot of mixed feelings towards the trial. So there's like a group of feminists that are like, oh, everyone's using this as an excuse to like bash women, and like I think that they're really focusing on the wrong thing. And I was shocked to see a bunch of people on social media being like, no one should be celebrating this. This is like an excuse. This is like a hoax. This is like Johnny Depp tricking everyone. He's so powerful. He's so rich. And I'm just thinking like, how did people get into such a...
Brainwashed.
How do they get so brainwashed into thinking this? And like, are they just really... Do they actually believe this? Are they trying to get clout in some way? Are they like... Because I can't understand the logical reasoning on why you would try to make this into such a like man versus woman, because it's not gender specific. Like you would support a victim of physical abuse regardless of the gender, right? But apparently not. There's a lot of people who are just like anti-men now. And I read one quote that was really kind of telling on this subject, whereas it's like, feminism means equal rights. It doesn't mean putting one gender over the other. And I think a lot of people, when they think of feminists, they think of like man-hating. And I think it's like a very radical, small group of like man-hating or men-hating feminists. And it could be guys and girls. I've seen both of them in this party. And I think it gives the rest of the group a really bad look. I think it's the same with like political affiliation. So regardless if you're Democrat or Republican, I think most people are pretty normal. Like they're closer to the middle part of the spectrum. But then you have like the extreme right and the extreme left who are so passionate and so vocal and so like outlandish in their opinions. Legal experts on social media prior to the results were saying how like, oh yeah, he's probably not going to win. Like he's going to win the public opinion, but like proving this defamation case is like incredibly hard to do. And now that he actually won the case, and even like airing out all this dirty laundry and like having his life effectively ruined for like the past 5 years, and like having his career completely really like kind of ruined just the past 5 years. I don't know. I'm surprised that there's any support left for Amber. Really, I think like there is a semblance of truth, whereas like there are a lot of misogynistic people who will use this as a way to like attack women in general. But again, I think that's like a small vocal minority. Like most people everywhere support Johnny. It's like, I don't know how you could not, especially after seeing everything that happened in the trial. And like Amber is obviously a liar, and she not only lied under oath during the trial, she also made up all the claims. Like, and her testimony was like such a terrible acting job. It was like her acting coach later came out and said like, oh yeah, Amber has always had trouble crying. And like, that's kind of hilarious, because it's like, you'd think as an actor that would be like one of your main skills, like you'd be able to fake cry on demand.
Yeah, but the funny part is like her fake crying is also just so horrendous.
Bad. It's like not even like, what's she doing? And she's like wiping away her eyebrows. Like, what are you thinking? Like, oh, well, this looks like I'm crying, right? If I'm doing this,
or like making such an ugly cry face, but it just like looks so pathetic. Okay, but I think back on the topic of like, you know, all these people still supporting her, like there is a group of people that will kind of just like undoubtedly support a specific party or person, no matter what type of news or evidence comes out against them.
Yeah,
like
and
Trump.
I think that like there's both of these groups in this trial. So like there are a bunch of men who will unequivocally hate women regardless of what happens.
Yeah.
And then there's also another group of women that will unequivocally hate men regardless of like the result or whatever. And then also, you know, both genders might fall into one or both of these groups somehow.
Yeah. I think the fact that it was like there was overwhelming support for Johnny Depp still proves that a majority of the people do look at evidence are normal. So I do think that like you can't expect the entire population to be radical and like insane.
I mean, I think I used to hold the thought that like everyone was a somewhat rational human being, and like presented with evidence, like irrefutable evidence, they would be willing to change their mind. But like time and time again, that's proven to be not the case. Like a bunch of people are just like irredeemable, regardless of how they got there, regardless of like how they were radicalized or what brought them to this current state. But they're just like unwilling to change their opinion, either because they don't have like the mental capacity or empathy to see another person's point of view, or they're just like have some sort of internal like, I don't know even what to say, like brain disease. It's like almost like a mental disease at this point, where it's like people are so off the rails.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because I feel like it's getting worse. I don't know if it's getting worse because of social media, because everyone's like a digital native nowadays, but I don't think it was this bad 10 years ago.
Probably social media. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been like exposed to these opinions without social media. But I can understand if like a woman was abused by a man in her past and is just hurt mentally by
and they just hate men
and they hate men. Like I can totally understand their perspective. But if you've never gone through that yourself, you don't have friends or family that have gone through that, and you just like literally want to identify with a group of party and feel like that belonging, then I do think that that's kind of like stupid.
Yeah, I think you're right when you talk about the belonging part. I think that's actually why a lot of people join causes that they don't really believe in. Like they just want to feel good about themselves. They want to feel like they're part of a group, and then they start to kind of lose their critical thinking skills, or maybe they never had them in the first place, and they'll just adopt the views of that group. And I think that's like, it's kind of sad in a way, because like people just want to feel like they belong somewhere, and I guess they'll find this online group, they'll find some sort of like moral superiority. That's not true activism. You're not actually making a difference. You're just being like an asshole on the internet, which I think a lot of people confuse with activism these days.
So one funny thing that I recently saw online was this Crunchy cult. Have you heard of that before?
No.
They're like these online groups of moms that push like this naturopathic way of like raising your children. So it's like you have to breastfeed, you have to give them like essential oils, you have to co-sleep, like basically a way of life or a way of raising your kids, but super extreme. And they will like mom shame you if you don't do it the way that they do. And then on the other spectrum, where they call it silky, is like if you do everything by science, and like if you put them into a crib to sleep and you like give them formula or something like that. But like I just thought how funny it was that like people can turn this into a cult.
Yeah, I think people these days, it kind of goes to the common theme of people are lost. Like, not only are they lost and they're looking for a group to belong in, but they also don't even have critical thinking skills, especially when I see people argue online. It's like they're unable to defend their own position if you actually ask them why they believe what they do. They're able to like memorize and parrot other people's thoughts, but when you actually like have a conversation, you realize that a lot of people, they don't actually know why they believe, or they're unable to like articulate exactly why they believe what they do. They're able to like repeat what they think they should say and what kind of sounds smart, but like they're actually unable to just defend their own position, which has always probably been true to an extent. I think the average person probably just is not that smart, honestly. But that's not the only problem. It's not like the average person is not that smart is a terrible thing, but it's that most people are unwilling to change that about themselves. Like they're unwilling to learn more, they're unwilling to improve, and they'd rather just complain and blame everyone else and make enemies out of whoever is unlike them as like a sort of excuse, saying like, oh, well, it's not my fault that I'm not successful or rich or XYZ. It's because of this other group. It's because of minorities. It's because of women. It's because of, I don't know, like a religious group. Like who knows what the excuse is? It's never their own fault. And I think like we talked about this before. There is like a certain level of discrimination and societal like imbalance, but like you also have to like do things on your own. You can't just expect things to be handed to you, which I actually think a lot of people do expect nowadays. Like there's a certain level of responsibility that government and society should owe people to an extent, which I think mostly the US and Western society definitely provide, and most societies around the world provide. Whereas like the guarantee of safety, for the most part, it's like the guarantee of like your currency not being devalued, which I guess is not really true anymore because of inflation.
That's a pretty like complicated topic, to be honest, because I think what you're trying to say is like on one end, a lot of people kind of self-sabotage in a way or self-handicap, and they blame other people for them not succeeding. Privilege obviously exists. Like some people are just born in a better position than others. But I think that's not a reason to not try. But a lot of people will use that as a reason to not try because they're like, well, I'm gonna try and I'm gonna fail anyway. And it's just easier to say that than to try and then fail or perhaps like a very small chance succeed, but they don't want to like deal with the potential of failing. Like that's really hard to swallow.
I think a lot of people are afraid of failure, and like obviously things are not fair. The world is not fair. Like the deck is stacked against you, and you should be a realist and you should accept that as reality, and you should also continue trying to achieve success. Just because the odds are against you doesn't mean you don't try. And a lot of people these days seem to have given up. There's like the Tangping movement in China where people have essentially like given up on the rat race, and they're just kind of getting enough money to like scrimp by and then just laze around and then make some more money and do it all over again, or like trying to mooch off their parents, and the basic like philosophy is essentially like, well, if the odds are stacked against us, why should we even try? And I'm really not a fan of that, because like the odds have always been stacked against you. It's not like, unless you're born very wealthy and you're in the like political and racial and religious majority of wherever you're born, like, and you can even be born ugly or something, right? Even if you're born really good looking, that's an obvious advantage. Like Amber Heard, she was voted to be like at one point the most beautiful woman in the world because of like her facial symmetry, etc. And like I think she's had a cocaine addiction for a very long time at this point. That's why she looks not as good anymore, and she's also older, of course. But like if she was an ugly person, she would have gotten decimated, like much more so than she did in the media. And like people were giving Johnny Depp crap because he looks older now. He's like gained some weight. And it's like pretty privilege is definitely a thing. Like if you're an uglier person, you're just going to get less respect and like less goodwill. But again, it's like, I think anyone who uses that an excuse to not try is like, you're only harming yourself really. And I don't know, it's kind of sad. I think that a lot of people could really benefit from like a growth mindset and just more positivity. And he's super positive about things.
Yeah, well, actually, it depends. Like we talked about how like I'm more positive about things because I always assume the worst is going to happen. So then when something that's better than the worst happens, I'm just like, oh great, that's better than what I expected. And Frank is actually an optimist, so he assumes that everything's going to work out, and when it doesn't, then he's like, well, crap. Like,
how could that not work out?
How could that happen?
Doesn't make any sense.
Life is tough, and it's like mostly really crappy, and I think people need to like cope, and so then they try to put like meaning into life. Like whenever something shitty happens, they try to like put a meaning behind it, but I don't think there's any meaning in life.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I think that we have it so good now that or a lot of people that live in a developed country can now even ponder, what is the meaning of life? What's my purpose? Like, what am I supposed to do? Whereas for the majority of mankind's history, people were just trying to survive. They were just trying to have enough food to get by, have enough resources to continue living. And it's been a very recent development that people have really started to ponder, like, or at least like majority of people, like wealthy people have thought about this before, obviously. And then religion to an extent has also answered a lot of these questions for like, oh, well, what should you be doing? What's the meaning of life? And I think the current way I think about it is that like everyone's meaning, you like pretty much live life to try and discover that, and you can make your own why. So the question is a lot more interesting than the answer, because you live through life and you find your own answer, and so it's going to be unique to every individual. For me, I always thought I wanted to start a family. I've always been very family oriented. There are other people who are focused on other things like spirituality or volunteering.
Their career mostly, I feel like.
Yeah, a lot of people focus on their career.
Yeah.
Maybe their friendships. maybe individual achievements.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people, especially in Western countries, have started focusing on their career a lot in the last, like, I don't know how many years. Like, most of my friends now, it's like their self-identity is only in their career. Like, if they're not doing
Yep.
well in their career, they don't want to start a family because they feel like they're not who
They haven't
like
made
they haven't reached their like
potential or
potential
whatever.
yet. Whereas I feel like my whole thing was always to just have a family. Like that was my goal. So now that I have a family, I feel like I already have pretty much everything that I need. And maybe that's why a lot of people in like Eastern countries are like they feel more fulfilled because their goals are not really career related. They're more like family oriented. Like career is a very individualized goal.
And especially, they've done a lot of research on happiness and longevity and what makes someone live for a longer period of time. And they've found a lot of commonalities between different cultures. And one of the main things is really belongingness towards a community. And so there's like an island in Okinawa where there's a bunch of centennials. Centennials is someone who lives past 100. And they found out that they all had this like group of friends ever since they were little. And it's like 4 or 5 friends per group, and they just kind of grow old together and they have regular contact with each other. Same thing with people in other cultures. The ones who live really long report happiness because they're part of their church's community. They're deeply ingrained in their local town through religion or volunteering or something else. It's like they remain active. And another common factors was not eating very much. So the less you eat, the better, essentially. And also daily exercise. So not strenuous exercise, they're not like weightlifting or cross-country skiing or anything, but just like walking, gardening. And it's like these things seem so simple. And like when you actually break down life, if you have your essentials met, and like a lot of people are like, hey, Frank, how do I become happy? Or like, how do I get out of this slump or depression or whatever? And it's like, well, are you eating right? Are you sleeping? Are you drinking water? Do you have like friends, family, people that support you? And if you have those 4 things, like, and you're still depressed, maybe you need to see like a psychiatrist to see if like you have a chemical imbalance in your brain or whatever. But most people like don't even have the basics down. Like we don't even have the basics down. Like we don't exercise regularly enough. Our diet is not the best.
It's hard to prioritize when you have like 2 little kids.
Yeah, other obligations.
But again, like it's what you prioritize, right? So if we do prioritize our health over like anything else, then
yeah.
yeah.
I don't know. I think also like modern society places too much emphasis on happiness. People are always like, oh, are you happy? Are you happy? Are you happy? It's like, well, I think it's better to be at peace and satisfied than if you're always chasing happiness is fleeting. It's like you're never going to have a constant rush of dopamine. Like that's just not possible. Even if you're doing drugs, your dopamine centers eventually like become weaker and weaker, and you need more and more drugs to continually achieve the same response. And so now people are going to like dopamine retreats, like I'll cut off all internet, cell phone usage, screen time. It's like a popular thing in the SF like tech crowd, but I think people undervalue having peace, like mental peace, peace at home, peace with your family. Like that's true happiness when you don't have to worry about all these things that are stressing you out, and your just daily interactions with the people that you love, like your family, your friends, because that's what life is really at the end of the day. It's just hanging out and like these small interactions every day. That's life. This is what we got.
Yeah. And when I met Frank one time, we were going to Big Sur, and I was driving like a crazy person because I wanted to get to Big Sur before sundown. Like we left pretty late and it was like a long drive. And then I saw the sunset, and so I like stopped at the side of the road and I was like, Frank, get off the car, like let's take a photo with the sun. And then we took a photo, and I immediately like shoved him back into the car and like started driving again. And he was like, what is wrong with you? And he actually got pretty upset. He was like, I don't understand like why you were like that. Like we had just met at that point, so you didn't really know me that well.
Annie was extremely upset because we didn't get a good picture.
Yeah.
I was like, the sun was down. I thought the picture was fine myself.
No, you can't see anything. Like if you've seen photos of Big Sur online, like it's beautiful, and that was the type of photo that I wanted to get. It was pitch black by the time we got there, and then so Frank was like, honestly, like it doesn't matter what we see, as long as we're together and we're enjoying the time we spend with each other. Like who cares? Like you didn't even want to see the sunset as it was setting. You literally took a photo, you didn't watch the sunset, and then you spent the next like 20 minutes driving. So like, yeah, and I think that was like the moment where like I literally had a shift, and I started using Instagram less and less and less, and like it's almost like the more that I enjoyed living in the moment, the less I enjoyed going on Instagram. And it's almost like social media is a way for us to like fill this void that we have in ourselves, and like we're trying to show this really happy side of us, and like look at what a great life that I'm living, because I'm not living a great life. But I don't know. It's like, am I making sense?
Yeah, I think it also depends on the social media platform, because Instagram is definitely like the picture perfect, let's Photoshop it, make it perfect. And before, I feel like it was more scandalous to actually Photoshop your pictures, and if people found out, they would like call you out. But now it's just normal. Like everyone Photoshops their pictures because that's what people on Instagram do. Like Kim Kardashian has an entire team that Photoshops her pictures for her to make them perfect. And I think that is extremely toxic. And Facebook products, essentially, they all kind of try to show off this like fake persona of like, hey, I'm living the perfect life. I'm going to all these fun events. I'm having the time of my life. Whereas like TikTok is way more organic. Like you still obviously see that. There's people who are trying to show off, but there's tons more of people who are like trying to teach, trying to be like just normal. Like obviously my production quality is super low. It's not like I do anything. And I think that like the key difference between like TikTok and something like Instagram or Facebook or Twitter is that after I'm on TikTok and I'm scrolling through, I'll be like, oh, that was fun. Like that hour went by, I learned some cool stuff. I saw some funny things. I saw some interesting things. And compared to like Instagram or Twitter, I'll be like, wow, like I feel more
really shit about myself.
More angry about the state of the world, or just like my mood will be worse. And so I think the same thing with YouTube. Like YouTube is pretty good, except the amount of content on YouTube, like their discovery and algorithm, I feel like is inferior to TikTok's. It's hard for me to discover new stuff. Like I'm always finding new creators who have really good videos, but it doesn't show up in my feed. Like I'll have to like see it through like a Reddit thread, or maybe like a TikTok or Twitter or somewhere else where they'll be like, oh yeah, this creator, like they make really good stuff. You should check out this video. And I'll look at it, I'm like, oh wow, that was really good. And they'll have millions of subs, but it's like I've never seen any of their stuff organically. And there's like no way I would have through YouTube.
Yeah, we're waiting for our McDonald's order. So let's start with what annoys me about Frank. It annoys me that every single time I get McDonald's, he always complains about how expensive it is.
It's so expensive.
Just let me.
Our McDonald's meal was $28. For the same price, we could have had like 2 whole Costco pizzas.
I over-ordered. I ordered 2 spicy McChickens, a cone, and I want his meal. So.
Yeah, I got a 10-piece McNugget and a McDouble, and then she turned the McNuggets into a meal.
Yeah. So it could have been like $22. But my point is, just let me enjoy my $5 McChicken. Thank you.
McChickens are not worth $5.
Every time, like literally every single time.
Every single time, I'm
it's so annoying.
Like, by how expensive.
And the fact that, like, it's like, we spend way more money on other types of food. Like, stop complaining about freaking McDonald's.
More worth it. McDonald's is a fast food place. It's supposed to be cheap.
What else do you complain about? But then he'll be like, oh, look at the casino across the street on black.
Seriously, this thing just looks sad. Like, how much does this cost?
I ordered 2 McChickens, so you can have 1.
All right, this McDouble was $3.
You can have 1 of my McChickens.
No, I'm good.
See what a really sweet wife I am? Yeah.
we crossed the border, so we went to a Canadian McDonald's when we should have tried American McDonald's. I wonder if the prices there are ludicrous like they are here.
Yeah.
Something that annoys me about Amy, even though I've showed her how to do it a million times, she never properly opens any bag and just tries to like shove. See how this is like stuck in the middle of the bag?
Yeah.
She didn't bother to open it. It takes her 2 seconds to like.
Yeah, I do that. He has mentioned this before. Would you stay in Canada for the rest of your life or move somewhere else?
I mean, do you want me to answer or are you going to answer?
Yeah, you can start.
Realistically, we'll probably stay in Canada unless there's like a amazing opportunity somewhere else.
Yeah, because my family's in Canada, obviously.
Was that obvious? Do people know that?
Yeah, I think we've said that multiple times. I enjoy being close to my parents, and hopefully one Frank's parents might move to the West Coast in the future, so then everyone will be kind of close together. And then I feel like the only reason we would go back is if we ever had to move for Frank's work, which we don't have to worry about right now. Better place to live, US or Canada?
It's easier to make money in the States. There's way less people in general in Canada. Yeah, I guess if you're more career focused, the US is a better place to be. If you're more like family focused, there are places in the US with really low cost of living, are safe, and have a lot of pluses. I've only lived in Vancouver, and for the US, I've lived kind of all over in like the Midwest, East Coast, West Coast. US is an incredibly diverse place. It's hard to generalize it as like one country because each individual state has its own culture and can be very drastically different. So as like a similar question, like where would I live if I could only pick one country? I would pick the United States because there's so many different cultures to experience and geography and natural beauty.
Yeah, Vancouver's great to retire, but like for a young person, if you're gonna be in Canada, you should at least be in Toronto.
Yeah, there's more job opportunities in the Toronto area.
I would say that Canada is really diverse too, though, in terms of like culture. It's
a lot of immigrants.
Yeah, a lot of immigrants. Like Vancouver is pretty much like a mini Asia. What are my thoughts on retroactive jealousy, which I Googled. I had to Google that. Like jealousy towards your previous or exes, ex-girlfriends or boyfriends. Funny story, I still do not know how many girlfriends Frank has had in the past because he refuses to tell me. Because I'm a very jealous person, I will probably not handle that well. It could go two ways. He's had significantly more girlfriends than I've had, then I'd be like very upset. And then the other scenario would be he's had less girlfriends than I've had, boyfriends. In that case, I would probably be like, ha ha ha, look at me, like so much more experience than you are. And because he hasn't told me, I haven't told him either.
I mean, Annie kind of knows because like
I know individual people. I know a few. Like you've had probably at least like 4, but like that doesn't tell me anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's like before we started dating, when we were just friends, we would talk about like our relationships and stuff. So it's not like she doesn't know anything. It's just that she doesn't know the full picture.
Very dangerous. If you meet someone and that you're slightly interested in them to become a significant other in the future, do not tell them anything about your previous relationships because they'll remember that.
No, I think it's fine. It's just that like, it depends on how jealous your partner is. Like
one time, I don't know if this is too much to share, but so when Frank and I first met, there was another guy that asked me out. We knew each other from college and he was also in San Francisco and I just moved to San Francisco. So he was like, why don't we catch up? And Frank and I had actually just gotten into a relationship and I basically didn't cancel that catch up. So I was like, well, it's a catch up with a guy. And so I went anyway. But then obviously I got there and he wanted more than just a catch up. And so I quickly left. And so when I got home, Frank was like, why did you come home so quickly? I was like, oh, it was like not a catch up. Like he was interested in more than a catch up. But he's like, well, I kind of expected that. I just didn't want to say anything. And years later, another friend came to Chicago to visit and was like, oh, like, oh, like, do you want to hang out? I was like, oh yeah, my friend, like the guy from that works at Airbnb. And Frank got so pissed, but he got confused. Like the other guy worked at
I
Facebook.
thought it was the other guy.
Yeah, and then when I said Airbnb, Frank was just like, are you kidding me? And so I didn't meet up with that guy, but like later we found out that he thought it was a different guy.
Yeah, sorry, random other guy. Got you mixed up. When my TikTok was blowing up, so when I first started, I was getting so many messages per day, and Annie would read every single one of them.
Yeah.
And if I responded to one girl too often, she'd be like, wait, who's this girl on LinkedIn? Why are you talking to her? I'll be like, I'm just answering these random questions.
I will go on his LinkedIn and read all the messages because it's like also new and exciting. And then if I see, I will only look at messages with girls. I just skip over the messages with guys. And typically it's a very like simple exchange. They ask like, hey, we'd love to like have a one-on-one session with you. And Frank usually answers like, no, I'm too busy. But like there are a few girls that would be like, have a lot of follow-up questions, like a lot, to the point where it's like, okay, you have to prevent things from happening. So like Frank doesn't even like register. He's just so like oblivious. Oh, one time, I don't know if we told the story before.
I don't think so.
My friend Cherry and Sarah came to stay with us in San Jose. They stayed for like 2 weeks. I was supposed to go up with Cherry and Sarah to San Francisco. Frank didn't want to make the road trip, so he was gonna stay home. But last minute, Sarah was like, I am going to stay home because I have work to do. And I was like, nuh-uh. There's no way that Frank and my friend Sarah is going to be left in the same apartment at the same time for a day. So I made Frank go up to San Francisco with me. There was 0.0001% chance that they were going to hook up or do anything, but
Yeah.
I'm very extra.
No trust.
No, babe. It's not that I don't trust you. I don't trust other people. And it's not that I don't trust Sarah either, but like you just cannot let there be any room for accidents to happen. I'm very extra. I'm gonna lose so many followers after this podcast.
I don't think anyone's gonna care.
People are gonna be like, oh my god, Annie's crazy.
I mean, you are crazy though. Just showing them your true self.
Yeah, Frank always says if he has like a hidden camera that recorded me, then people
Yeah, people don't realize the extent of Annie's craziness.
Are you sure you don't want my McChicken?
I mean, I'll eat half if you don't want it, but otherwise you should just eat it.
He'll always be like, I'll eat whatever you don't eat. So now I have to pretend that I'm full and be like, oh, I'm gonna throw it away if you don't eat it. And then he'll be like, okay, I'll eat it.
I mean, that's not true. You throw away ice creams all the time.
He's also really bad at ordering food for himself. So he'll always order food that he doesn't like, or he'll order food that, like, too little food. So now I'll always have to give him my food or switch my food with him. Because whenever he orders something that I'm like, he's not gonna like it, I'll always order something on the menu that I know that he'll like. So we'll always switch. I'm amazing. That's why you married me.
Yep.
Would you guys ever live abroad? China, Japan, Asia in particular.
It would definitely be China because we have relatives there. It'd be pretty hard to live anywhere else, especially because most Asian countries make it very hard for you to own property or even like rent places if you're not a citizen there. China as well, but because we have relatives in China, at least we would have a place to stay. And we're ethnically Chinese, so.
I in particular will never live in Europe because I can't like live the way that they live. Every Sunday, every single store is closed. And like no hate, but most countries are very inefficient. Like they're just slow at doing everything.
I've never been to Europe.
Yeah, we need to go to Europe. Europe is fun to visit, but it's really hard to live for a long time. Like for the rest of my life, like no, I can't. Which Gen 1 Pokemon starter he would choose and why? I'm going to say that you will choose Charmander.
So it depends actually. When I was younger, I always chose Squirtle because Squirtle has the best stats as Blastoise. And so like basically Pokemon never had an official difficulty level, but Bulbasaur was essentially for like the easiest level, Squirtle was medium, and Charmander was hard. Because Charmander, it'd be difficult to defeat the first two gym leaders, which fire types were ineffective towards. Whereas Bulbasaur was effective against both of the first two, and Squirtle was effective against the first one, and was neutral towards the second one. As I grew older, I don't know at which point I actually switched to Charmander, and that was mostly just because I thought Charizard was really cool. The anime really highlights Charizard as like one of the strongest Pokemon, and in the movies, Charizard is really highlighted. Whereas Blastoise is Gary's Pokemon, and like no one really likes Gary. He's like a jerk in the anime. Eventually becomes a researcher, like doesn't even become champion or anything. And so, yeah, I think the anime had a large part to do with like why I eventually liked Charizard more and thus Charmander. But originally, I liked Squirtle a whole lot. I never liked Bulbasaur. I thought he was lame.
Let's end this. We're gonna drive home soon.
Thanks for watching the Frankly Speaking podcast. Hope to see all of you again very soon.